Good morning. I'm Amy O'Donnell, Communications Director for Texas Alliance for Life, welcoming you to this week's TAL Update. Today, I have the privilege of interviewing Representative Capriglione, the author of the Human Life Protection Act that passed in the 87th legislative session. Welcome, Gio, as you like to be called.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
It's good to have you with us. The Human Life Protection Act was one of several key pieces of legislation that moved through the 87th legislative session and was signed into law. Others were the Heartbeat Act and the Chemical Abortion Safety Protocols Bill, and a few others as well. Those were significant in that the Heartbeat Act went into effect sooner and has been saving many lives in Texas since September 1st from a heartbeat on. Chemical Abortion Safety Protocols Bill went into effect in December. And the Human Life Protection Act, I feel like, kind of fell a little bit under the radar in light of these others that save lives sooner getting a little bit more press, perhaps rightfully so. But Gio, can you tell our viewers today, why is the passage of the Human Life Protection Act so significant? What were some of the thoughts behind it, and anything you want to share about working on it personally to move it forward?
Sure thing. And you're right. We did have a very successful session. I would say probably the last 13 months, last 14 months have been the most important, the best months ever for the pro-life movement. And it was a full team effort by a lot of folks to try and pass these significant pieces of legislation. On the Human Life Protection Act, quite frankly, the idea was to say, hey, somehow, someday, right? So we were working on this, we started working on this maybe 3 or 4 years ago, right? But hey, someday maybe Supreme Court will change. Maybe someday the Supreme Court will finally see the errors in their ways. So we worked on that legislation in order to say it's when that happens, not if, but when that happens, let's have Texas be all ready for that moment. And so that we could already have our laws in place so that we would just be able to say, hey, now that the Supreme Court has done this, we're ready to do that. And for those who are watching, when we were working on that, it wasn't clear that that was necessarily going to be just around the corner, right? We did that. We worked on it. It was under the radar because, quite frankly, the Supreme Court at that time didn't look like it was ever going to change its mind. What a difference a year makes, right?
That's right. It's a huge difference. We got asked several times in interviews and other settings, what are the goals for Texas as far as life legislation goes? What about this? What about considering this policy idea or this policy idea? And we would often talk about the Human Life Protection Act and how we want to have it in place so that it's triggered, so to speak. And some would even call it a trigger bill, which we landed on Human Life Protection Act as a name. We liked that a little bit more, but we still see it called the trigger bill in press. But it's triggered, so to speak, by the Supreme Court's decision to scale back or overturn Roe v. Wade. And I would always say, well, if only we had a crystal ball to see when that was going to happen, but we want to be ready in Texas. And then here we are. It's been very surreal. And Joe and I are still processing. We've talked about this a lot. I think we're just kind of in shock. Just out of curiosity, what was your initial reaction?
Well, I mean, maybe like you all, I was really not expecting to get a heads up months early, right? I guess I thought, okay, somewhere in June or July, we'll start hearing what's going on. But obviously, with the release of that initial ruling, I kind of set all the wheels in motion, saying, hey, this isn't if, it's when this is going to ultimately happen. So that's when things I think are really exciting, knowing that the trigger bill and but quite frankly, all of the work we had, all the groundwork we had done here in Texas to get ready for that moment. For those that are watching, I mean, essentially what we said was, hey, we're not going to have to go back to session. We're not going to have to go to a special session. We're not going to have to round people up, right? Maybe who are going to leave, right? We're going to already have this in place. And we've had, because I've seen some people say, well, you should have that debate now. And I would say we've had that debate for almost 50 years, right? I mean, we've been having that debate. People know what their positions are on it. We know what our positions are on that. So let's just craft the law now. And so when that first happened, I mean, it was just, I just remember I was on SCOTUS blog, just like everybody else trying to hit refresh for the first time, learning a lot about the Supreme Court and its process. And then right then and there, our law began the process of being triggered.
And you were one of the authors of that. I imagine that has to feel very rewarding to know that you played such a key part, again, with many other people involved as well, in protecting life in our state.
Sure. And for I mean, again, I'm an elected official, and it's one of the things that I campaigned on when I first ran, 5 sessions ago, 4 sessions ago, 3 sessions ago. And it does feel gratifying that not only that we passed this law, but what the intents and the purposes of it are going to finally happen here in the United States. I mean, it really is a watershed moment in America where we always talked about changing the hearts and minds of folks, right? And it's happened, okay? Because going forward, people in other states, okay, are going to also have to decide to make that decision. And for me, I think that's also another key part of this ruling, which is who should be held accountable to a decision as important as life, right? Should it be justices who are appointed sometimes 2 years ago, sometimes 40 years ago by other people and not elected? Or should it be those who are on the ballot? And we always, on our side, on the pro-life side, have always said, hey, I want to be held accountable. And so, I don't know, I think ultimately this is great for democracy, and it's great for the pro-life movement.
It is great. And as you talk about who do we want to hold accountable, to protect life, the other side of that, who do we want to hold accountable for taking lives when abortion is illegal? And in Texas, we believe that should be abortion providers or others who do abortion outside of the law, not the women. And can you talk about that a little bit in light of the Human Life Protection Act and how that law was crafted with that in mind?
Sure. I mean, and I think that is an important thing to talk about, because there are definitely folks, who say, well, you should punish everybody, put everyone in jail, put everyone in prison, sentence them to death and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, the reality is that unfortunately, but factually, tens of millions of abortions have been performed. Okay. And, we forgive, right? What I never contemplated doing was saying, hey, all of those tens of millions of women should have been sent to prison, right? What we want to do is say, listen, there are people who are directly culpable for these abortions. They're directly culpable for the murder of these unborn children. And those are the ones that we're going to hold responsible, right? And how are we going to hold them responsible? Well, what I think this trigger bill does, that it goes after those who are culpable in a variety of different ways, right? So first and foremost, we're going after the doctor, right? Mm-hmm. I say doctor in quotes when we're talking about this, but the doctor's doing it. Okay, you're going to lose your license. You're going to be civilly liable, huge, hefty penalties, right? 100,000 K or more, and also criminal penalties, okay? And so, of course, when this all starts happening, we already heard some district attorneys in some counties saying, oh, well, we're not going to prosecute. Well, we thought of that too, right? Because guess what? You're still going to be civilly liable. And guess what? It's not the DA, it's the Attorney General. And I'm pretty sure Ken Paxton is going to do everything he can to make sure that those doctors who perform now felonies, that they be eventually sent to prison and so on. But nowhere in our legislation do we talk about making the women liable for those.
I think that's very important. And we do have amazing resources in Texas for women facing planned or unplanned pregnancies. And the legislature has done a lot to appropriate funds to the Alternatives to Abortion program, the Healthy Texas Women program, and other resources that are available for women. I know the governor even put together kind of a one-stop shop for family resources that highlights all of those and gives the links for people to go and click and find out more information. And so we'll put that information in the body of this video that we're sharing here today. But also, I would like to touch on the fact that our work is not done yet. So in Texas, now it's really up to the voters and the legislators, as it is across the country, to decide where we want to land on the life issue. Right now, we have life protected, but we know that we have to keep working towards that. So what are your thoughts on that as we kind of look at what that means for Texas moving forward?
Well, and I think part of the answer to this is what you just talked about, is what Texas has done and will continue to do to go and support these women and these children that previously were faced with a difficult decision, right? And what I would say is, because we get that a lot in the public, it's like, oh, Texas doesn't necessarily do much. But what I'd like people to do is push back against that, because the reality is, most of our funding for the legislature goes to healthcare and healthcare related funds. And most of that money goes primarily to women and children, right? And we have very specific programs that we've grown just over the last 2 and 3 years, alternatives to abortion being one of them, where we're providing all sorts of support, social support, counseling. We're providing everything from diapers to daycare and all of that for new moms who need help. This last session, we went and we extended the amount of time we provided health care for women on Medicaid from 2 months after having a pregnancy to 6 months. And I know that there's a lot of other members, conservative Republican members, who are willing to go and provide additional support before and after the pregnancy, foster care services, adoption services, right? We're ready to go here in Texas to make sure that we support life from conception all the way to natural death. And so when you ask what is next, we're just started, right? I mean, we're going to make Texas an incredible place to have and to keep and to grow families.
And I would just tag off of that, but to continue to progress in the direction that we're going, which we're so excited to see Texas protecting life and Texas providing for women, because we know Texas cares about both women and the babies and the children in our state. With that in mind, it's key for everybody to keep voting life. And so we know that for many of our watchers, life is a non-negotiable when it comes to voting. It is for me. It is for, I would imagine, most, if not all of you who are tuning in today, who follow our Facebook page and Twitter and other social media feeds. So I just want to encourage you, keep voting life, and we need to keep educating people on the importance of protecting life and voting life and the resources that we have available in Texas, so that when we're asked, we know how to respond. And so again, I encourage you to check out that page the governor put together, read through the resources available. We want to all be ready to have those conversations and point people in need in the right direction so that we can continue to take care of the women and babies in our state and do a great job with that. Representative Capriglione, thank you for joining me today. Do you have anything else you want to add?
No, I think you're right. I mean, let's just, like you said, go vote. There's an election in November, and you can continue to vote pro-life, right? I mean, and this is the whole point of democracy, is you have decision makers who can be held accountable, and that's what elections are about. So please just go and continue to support life and go support your pro-life conservatives.
That's right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we hope to see you back again next week.